Have you ever wanted to take the opportunity to go to Mars as part of a colonization mission, to see with your own eyes the 26-kilometer-high Olympus volcano, or the monstrous Valles Marineris, which is 11 kilometers deep? And what would it be like to spend half a year in the grip of an impenetrable, planet-wide dust storm? If the prospects I've mentioned don't tempt you, at least imagine what the metal bodies of the Mars rovers experience, having ended up on the surface of our rusty neighbor by the will of space agencies. Right now, Mars is being actively explored by two vehicles, Curiosity and Perseverance. The rest are forever frozen in the dunes of the red planet, now nothing more than useless scrap metal. However, despite the active exploration of Mars, we still cannot definitively answer the question of whether there was ever life on it. Perhaps it exists even now, and if so, what might it look like? In order to try to answer these questions, let's go through the unusual and unique discoveries made by the aforementioned devices. What can they tell us? First, let's look at the features of the Martian terrain. In 2023, Curiosity, by drilling sedimentary rocks in the Watery region, discovered a network of small cracks. This serves as direct evidence that the planet was once quite a wet place. The rock where these formations were discovered was named Ponters. Are there similar locations on Earth? Of course they can be found anywhere, because basically it's just ordinary clay mud that dried up over time. Especially often, terrain that looks like patches, like a patchwork quilt made up of cracked fragments, can be seen in the deserts of southern arid countries. What conclusions follow from the discovery? Absolutely logical. Where there is water, there can be life. Also, images taken by the high-resolution imaging science camera on the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter in 2024 indicate the presence of more widespread cracks and patterns in many locations on Mars. Scientists explain this by the behavior of ice beneath the crust. Depending on the season, it expands or contracts, causing the soil to crack and break into fragments. But there are hypotheses supporting cyclical climate changes. On Mars, it's just the tip of a colossal iceberg. After the well-known Martian blueberries, many unique rocks and formations were discovered. What do you say about the fish skeleton discovered by Curiosity in Gale Crater? Isn't this yet another confirmation of Mars's wet past and the possible existence of at least primitive life? Let me clarify right away. Don't be surprised by the gradual release of information in the media. You have to keep in mind that the photos and samples sent by the rovers are subject to gradual decoding. But as soon as scientists process the data, the public finds out about it right away. Let's get back to the fish skeleton. What can we say about this artifact? While exploring the surface of Gale Crater, the rover sent an amazing photo. It shows an extremely strange rock with sharp spikes that look very much like fish bones. If we add to this the conclusions that many valleys on Mars are the beds of ancient rivers and the deepest craters are the basins of dried-up lakes, then the puzzle slowly starts to come together. How do astroarchaeologists classify this finding? Experts unanimously say that no Mars rover has ever discovered a stranger artifact in the entire history of Mars exploration. It's impossible to rein in your imagination when looking at this stone. Some people say it looks like a fossilized fish, others see fir branches, and some claim it's an artificial object. Maybe it's a dragon that Daenerys Stormborn didn't have time to raise. Let's move from fantasy to facts and continue to reveal the recent discoveries of the nimble Mars rovers. Are there any among them that indirectly indicate the presence of past life that once thrived on this planet? Organic molecules found in samples of clay deposits can be considered such, the very ones that most likely formed in the presence of water. Among the organic compounds discovered by Curiosity, by the way, Perseverance also found similar ones in the Jezero crater. They contain theophanes, propane, and benzene, which have carbon, the basis of life as we know it. But why don't scientists consider this finding 100% proof that Mars was once alive? The thing is, organic matter doesn't always mean life. It can also form as a result of non-biological processes. However, this discovery proves that several billion years ago, the red planet had chemical conditions that were potentially suitable for the emergence of life. The samples that scientists are eagerly waiting to be analyzed are fragments of rock obtained by drilling the delta of an ancient river, discovered by the Perseverance rover in Jezero crater. The device collected about 20 soil samples using a mini drill that penetrates only 6 centimeters into the surface of Mars. But these cores are priceless for Earth science. What kind of sensational discoveries are astroarchaeologists expecting from these samples in Jezero crater? There is an area called Chiava Waterfall, and that's exactly where these samples were taken from. Preliminary analysis has found carbonates, sulfates, and other deposits in the rocks, once again indicating a watery environment where they formed. But most importantly, there are organic molecules. Perseverance is equipped with innovative instruments that have identified structures in the soil that strongly resemble traces of microbial life. This has not yet been biologically confirmed, and the samples have not been fully studied, so we are waiting for sensational results. However, they will only appear in a few years. Imagine that you are piloting a Mars rover. What sounds would accompany your mission? Something like this. In my opinion, the mechanical movements of the robots sound equally eerie both among the howling winds and in dead silence. If you enjoy walking at night or going on overnight hikes, then you would really like the profession of a Mars rover driver. After all, under the Martian sky, you will see the full diversity of the starry population of this part of the universe. After all, your view won't be obstructed by the constant electrical pollution that's present on Earth. However, we've gotten distracted by a romantic pause. Meanwhile, it's worth recalling what other discoveries made by the Mars rovers have been identified and classified as possible signs of life on the planet. First of all, it's worth mentioning the incidents that happened with the rover Curiosity in the summer of 2024. Once, while studying the Gaitas Vallis Channel in Gale Crater, the rover drove onto a rock which split apart when it cracked. Inside, there were bright yellow crystals of pure sulfur. Later, it became clear that the entire plateau was covered with similar rocks. Why is this a great find for astronomers? The formation of pure sulfur requires very specific conditions, either volcanic vents or boiling springs. Considering the fact that probes are still detecting Marsquakes on the red planet, Mars's volcanic past was impressive. At that time, water most likely actively interacted with volcanic rocks, resulting in an abundance of bright sulfur deposits. So, what does this mean? Sulfur is a key micronutrient involved in the formation of amino acids, which in turn are the basis of proteins that make up carbon-based life. It's no wonder that in hydrothermal systems on Earth, noticeable microbial activity is often found. That is, thanks to the Perseverance rover, we have received yet another piece of evidence that Mars was not so lifeless in the past. All these discoveries were made earlier, but are there any relatively fresh samples found on the red planet that are planned to be studied on Earth? Yes, there are, and these are primarily coral stone and quartz crystals. Let's start with the first one. Recently, Curiosity discovered a very strange structure on the surface of Gale Crater. If you mentally move from this desert location to Earth, you might think you're looking at a coral inhabitant of the ocean floor. The stone has a diameter of 2.5 centimeters, and it was formed about 1 billion years ago as a result of water evaporation of mineralized compounds, which left behind bizarre crystallized structures. And what about quartz crystals? They were also recently discovered by the Perseverance rover in the Jezero crater, in the area of the river delta of the ancient Martian body of water. The device extracted cores by drilling, in which it found quartz crystals. What is quartz? It's a mixture of silicon and oxygen on Earth, often found in hydrothermal systems or sedimentary rocks. So quartz crystals indicate processes related to water. Don't you think that too much evidence of Mars's watery past has been found to ignore? Also, the quartz crystals in Jezero crater further confirm that there really was once a huge lake here, which has now become a rocky basin. But that's not all. Quartz on the red planet is not just a discovery. It is a time capsule, a keeper of possible traces of organics that existed on the surface of Mars billions of years ago. The evidence comes from discoveries in the deserts of Western Australia and the Atacama. Scientists have repeatedly found quartz there containing traces of microbes about 3.5 billion years old. We can expect the same from Martian artifacts when the cores arrive on Earth and are studied in laboratories. If microfossils are found in quartz crystals, it will be the first indisputable evidence of past life on Mars. What about the other discoveries? They are also of great importance as they currently serve as indirect evidence of the presence of a large number of bodies of water on the ancient Martian surface. Do you think we'd leave you without an info dessert? No way. As mentioned earlier, decoding the data received from the rovers happens gradually and extremely slowly. But after processing, the photos become publicly available and sometimes catch the eye of ordinary people, as well as ufologists and seekers of life on other planets. And on one of these images, something incredible was discovered resembling an entrance to an underground room. Judge for yourself. Here is the photo. You have to admit, few people would interpret it differently. Interestingly, the size ratio showed an identical match with the earthly parameters of similar structures. This entrance looks very similar to those that tourists see in the Egyptian pyramids, which means it might have been built by flesh and blood beings. The first to speak about this was Scott Waring, a virtual archaeologist and ufologist. He almost immediately announced to the world that an entrance to a tomb had been discovered on the front of Greenview. Scientists quickly dismissed these hypotheses, citing the Martian Sphinx story as a reminder. In reality, it was caused by collective imagination, the play of light and shadow, and also pareidolia, one of the visual illusions that manifests itself in the mistaken perception of certain images that do not actually exist. If this is not an artificial opening, then what could have created such a perfectly rectangular entrance? Astronomers explain this by natural processes, tectonic cracks, or erosive effects such as the flows of long-dried rivers or Martian winds. There is logic in this assumption because the rocks where the supposed entrance was found are sedimentary, meaning they are easily destroyed. It could also very well be a so-called lava tube or volcanic cave, a natural underground formation. Are there any other reasons to refute the hypothesis that the object in the photo is of artificial origin? Yes, and the lack of archaeological evidence as well. After all, there is still no evidence of a civilization on Mars, either in the past or now. However, neither side has provided sufficiently strong or indisputable evidence to prove their point. So for now, any point of view can be questioned. You know, it's not hard to guess what the Mariana Trench and the early universe have in common. Both objects are practically unexplored, and evidence of this fact is increasingly emerging on the scientific horizon. The sensation began after the James Webb Research Telescope was put into operation. It not only independently discovered numerous anomalies from the perspective of generally accepted cosmological theories, but also further investigated those found by other observatories. That's how the shell QS objects came into its focus, and for convenience we'll shorten their name to S objects. The abbreviation stands for Subaru Hyper-Z Exploration of Low Luminosity Quasars, which indicates that these objects were discovered by the Subaru telescope. These remarkable structures have a very high redshift. Everyone familiar with the Doppler effect knows that with such parameters, the object is located very far from Earth, at tens of billions of kilometers away, that is, at the dawn of the universe. Why are these structures called quasars? Strictly speaking, these are quasar-like objects with very low luminosity. Accordingly, detecting them, especially at such enormous distances, is incredibly difficult. But the Subaru telescope managed to do it when it was monitoring a significant area of deep space. At that time, its lens was aimed specifically at objects with high redshift, meaning those that are significantly distant from us. After some time, James Webb became interested in the mysterious structures and conducted more detailed observations to clarify their characteristics. Just think about it, the light from these objects has been traveling to us for billions of years, so it's possible that now we're only observing the shadows of cosmic dead bodies. I wonder what sounds they made. Maybe something like this. But what is the value of such research besides the somber romance of studying deep space artifacts? Such high redshift values indicate that quasar-like structures formed when the universe was less than 1 billion years old, which according to the Big Bang Theory is impossible. There are two options here. Either we are misinterpreting what we see, or the fundamental cosmological theory is a fiction. Another notable characteristic of S objects is their very low luminosity, which may indicate that either star formation processes are taking place in the centers of these structures, or there are not very active supermassive black holes there. The classification of quasar-like clusters is also complicated by the complexity and diversity of their spectral characteristics and their very compact sizes. What else surprises astrophysicists when studying the universe is, first of all, their ambiguous nature. As we mentioned earlier, they display characteristics of ancient stars, and at the same time, supermassive black holes. What confuses scientists? Astrophysicists are unsure what causes the luminosity of quasar-like structures. Moreover, when James Webb delved deeper into studying the spectrum of this object, previously unknown signatures were discovered, absolutely unique ones that require further research. The scientific community also continues to repeat an idea that has already become tiresome even for ordinary people. They say that nothing discovered could possibly exist in such a remote location, but denying the existence of S objects in the early universe is like not believing your own eyes, because the facts provided by the Subaru and James Webb telescopes are stubborn and uncompromising. What thoughts cross the minds of renowned scientists when they go through vast amounts of scientific information about S objects? Many of them notice their connection to cosmological mysteries discovered earlier. For example, structures called little red dots or small red dots. They are also compact redshifted objects that appeared in the first 1.5 billion years of the universe's existence. In this context, scientists see a hint at the existence of primordial black holes. What are they? According to theories, unlike stellar black holes, which are the final stage in the evolution of massive stars, these objects formed in the very first moments of our universe's existence. However, the nature of their appearance remains mysterious. How exactly did the density fluctuations in the hot plasma arise, and what triggered this process? There are still no reasonable answers to these and other questions. Currently, it's believed that primordial black holes form through the following general mechanism. In the early universe, the density of matter was incredibly high, but at the same time, it was not uniform. Since the universe began to expand immediately after the explosion, quantum fluctuations increased significantly and could create regions where the density of matter was monstrously high. Thus, when it exceeded the critical threshold, the fabric of space simply collapsed under its own gravity. According to modern hypotheses, this is exactly how primordial holes appeared without the involvement of massive stars. What are the masses of primordial black holes? It is believed that their masses could range from those of the moon or Earth to millions of suns. It all depended on the conditions under which the objects formed. There may even have been black holes with masses of billions of suns. But all of this is just speculation, since no clear evidence has been provided so far. Let's get back to S objects. How could they be connected to primordial black holes and other amazing anomalies of the universe? Some similarity in size and degree of redshift between the small red dots and the S objects leads scientists to think they might have a common origin, which in turn indirectly connects them to the aforementioned primordial spatial funnels. In any case, further study of such structures, which possess incredible masses and relatively compact sizes, will allow us to look into the era of cosmic dawn and understand the mysterious processes underlying the emergence of the universe. For example, what does the discovery of heavy elements in S objects or similar ones give us? This may indicate that the building blocks for the formation of planets, and possibly even forms of life, appeared much earlier than we thought. Undoubtedly, this will lead to a revision of cosmological models, but the process can no longer be stopped. At the very least, based on the study of S objects, we will have to adjust theories of galaxy formation provided that these structures do indeed contain regions of star formation or supermassive black holes. Is there a link between these objects and the search for biosignatures? Not directly, but there is some connection. It is quite possible that organic molecules may be found in the spectrum, which will later be transported to different locations in the universe. Here you have one of the theories of the origin of life, panspermia. What if it turns out that shell QS are directly connected to primordial black holes? This would be a revolutionary discovery, allowing us to partially explain the phenomenon of dark matter and its role in the abnormally rapid growth of galaxies in the early universe. Obviously, now the ranks of the destroyers of cosmology have grown, along with the small red dots. S objects are also appearing in the rearguard. The final question is, what exactly might shell QS look like? Let's move away from theoretical speculations and boring physical parameters and try to imagine the types of objects in reality. For example, these could be quasars, shrouded in clouds of dust so dense that they completely absorb optical and ultraviolet radiation, so they can only be seen in the infrared range. That's why the James Webb Telescope detected these objects. Inside the impenetrable dusty mass, there is an active galactic nucleus with a massive black hole at its center. In any case, 9 out of 13 studies have shown that S objects look exactly like this. The second option is compact galaxies, whose star formation rate is impressive. However, such formations deplete too quickly, becoming passive, which means we are very lucky to observe them in their active phase. The third option is an intermediate stage of evolution, What does that mean? In practice, S objects can be an evolutionary link between little red dots and classical quasars. And once again, terrestrial astronomy gets lucky. It's not often that we get to observe intermediate forms of objects. And the last hypothesis is based on the discovery of unique chemical signatures that we talked about at the beginning of the video. This places Shell QS among the rarest cosmic artifacts with extraordinary chemical properties. Perhaps this is the most mysterious and even frightening answer, because the unknown always causes concern. However, in our analysis, which is based on rather superficial data, we do not take into account many important aspects, so we may encounter surprises where we least expect them. For example, what if during the study, S objects exhibit inexplicable physical properties, demonstrate unusual spectral characteristics, show unexpected radiation patterns, or emit anomalous radio signals? How would we interpret the behavior of the objects in that case? Only time can answer these questions, since the research will continue in 2026. We hope they will help clarify the evolutionary role of Shell QS, as well as deepen the analysis of their spectrum and determine their impact on the process of the universe's reionization. Do you enjoy traveling and going on excursions? What locations do you prefer? A bench in the park on the next street, or regular flights to Australia? If the second scenario is closer to you, then this video is for you, because we suggest going very far away to immerse yourself as realistically as possible in the frozen world of the dwarf planet Pluto. And it doesn't matter at all that it was once expelled from the ranks of the planets in the solar system. This fact hasn't affected the allure of this distant and almost unexplored celestial body in any way. A journey to Pluto is not just empty inventions and fantasies. It's based on scientific data obtained from the James Webb Telescope, as well as the New Horizons probe mission, which was fortunate enough to see Pluto with its own cameras. So, what does an astronaut need to do first in order to safely visit Pluto? Let's skip the details and minor things, such as the incredible distance, harsh cosmic radiation, and the lack of technical capabilities. Let's assume we have all of that. So the only thing an astronaut needs is an ultra-durable spacesuit, because without it, in this icy desert, lost in the cosmic vacuum, there's definitely nothing to do. The second question is, where is the best place to land? Definitely, it's the Tombaugh region, or the heart of Pluto, as the most studied location of the dwarf planet. The vast area, 2,300 meters in diameter, really does look like a huge heart. The region is bordered by two icy mountain ranges, Norgay and Hillary, between which lies the Sputnik Plain. In fact, it's a perfect landing site for a module, since there isn't a single crater or significant unevenness on it. But before we land, let's ask ourselves another question. Why is this area so much brighter compared to other regions? Could it be that such a bright shade poses some kind of danger to a visitor to the planet? According to the latest data, Sputnik Planitia is a relatively young formation that formed about 100 million years ago from frozen nitrogen, as well as carbon monoxide and methane. Sputnik Planitia likely formed through convection or thermal expansion. However, according to another theory, it is an ancient impact crater that gradually filled up. No matter how this region was formed, it is relatively safe, which is why we will land there. What will an astronaut feel when stepping out of the landing module onto the surface of Pluto? The first sensations will most likely be similar to euphoria. After all, due to the extremely low gravity, which is only 6% of Earth's a person's weight on this dwarf planet, will decrease by 16 times. That means you'll be able to jump 10 to 20 meters from a standstill, like a clumsy two-legged grasshopper. In some ways, it will be similar to being on the moon, only without the annoying regolith and with much more impressive jumps. After all, Under such physical conditions, they are something between weightlessness and flight. By the way, descending down to the Plutonian surface will also be very smooth and slow. What if your spacesuit got damaged right after landing? Would the consequences be catastrophic? The astronaut's blood would instantly boil from the extremely low pressure. After all, Pluto's atmosphere is 1,000 times thinner than at the summit of Everest, and its pressure barely reaches 10 microbars. That is, there is practically no atmosphere on the small planet abandoned on the outskirts of the solar system. For the most part, it is a vacuum. But what about the extremely low temperature, which according to probes and telescopes reaches almost absolute zero? Wouldn't the astronaut feel it? Even in a super-modern, ultra-complex, and mega-technological spacesuit, a person on Pluto will still feel deadly, freezing cold, because they will be exposed to an intense minus 230 degrees Celsius. Their fingers, nose, and limbs will noticeably freeze, and no heating system will be able to prevent this. Gradually, the body will get used to these new sensations, and the astronaut will start looking around to see what exactly the uninvited visitor will see around him. Most of Pluto's surface in the Tombaugh region is covered with a mixture of carbon monoxide, nitrogen, and methane ice. Sometimes it's dazzlingly white, and in some places it's reddish-brown, especially in places where substances called tholins are formed thanks to cosmic rays. At this moment, the astronaut first gets the idea about Pluto's subsurface ocean. After all, looking down at his feet, he will see a smooth surface with patterns similar to those that decorate Earth's lakes in winter. By the way, according to research, these patterns appear due to ice convection, when warm masses rise and the surface is renewed. I wonder if any kind of life could arise in Pluto's subglacial ocean, where the liquid should be quite warm. On the celestial body's surface, any forms of life are unlikely because of the extreme cold, the thin atmosphere, and the intense radiation. But in the subsurface ocean, there could very well be life similar to the one found in the ocean beneath Europa. Beneath Pluto's 300-kilometer thick crust, there is hypothetically an ocean made of liquid water mixed with ammonia, which acts as an antifreeze. What kind of monsters could be there? Probably only extremophiles, such as those in Antarctic ice, could live there. Life in its primitive forms could also be found in Pluto's cryovolcanoes, but only as viruses resistant to cold or as silicon-based organisms with no analogs on Earth. However, these are just theories. At the moment, neither New Horizons nor James Webb confirm a single sign of life detected on Pluto. But have we forgotten about sounds? Can any be heard in this dead desert? Perhaps on Pluto you can hear the howling of the wind. The scraping of ice. Or the barely audible crackle of cosmic rays, invisibly piercing through space unprotected by an atmosphere. It's unlikely, most likely the astronaut will only hear his own breathing and footsteps, since the atmosphere is so thin that it hardly transmits any sounds at all. However, if you descend into one of the deep canyons, hundreds of kilometers long, which were once formed by ancient tectonic activity, you might feel a light wind made up of nitrogen gas. Remember, at the beginning of the video, we mentioned the Hillary Mountains. This is the very ridge that borders Sputnik Planitia, where our module landed from the south. The height of these mountains reaches about 2 kilometers. Although the data varies, in any case, climbing the peaks on Pluto is a real pleasure. Can you guess why? Of course, it's because of the low gravity. The less you weigh, the easier it is to climb up, so the ascent would feel more like a walk up a gentle hill. But if, overwhelmed by emotion, the astronaut decides to take off his glove, it would be like death, because his hand would instantly freeze and all the liquid would evaporate in a flash. But all the dangers are more than compensated by the view from the summit. From the Hillary Ridge, you can clearly see the snow-white plains of Sputnik, the frozen solid fountains of cryovolcanoes that periodically erupt with deadly force, and also the Cthulhu region, which has spread its black and rusty tentacles around, making it truly resemble a Lovecraftian monster. The Cthulhu region deserves special mention, as it is the most remarkable and mysterious location on Pluto. It was first discovered and relatively well studied by New Horizons in 2015. James Webb continues to work on visual imaging and research of this area, which is located on the planet's equator. The region is quite vast, about 3,000 kilometers long and about 600 kilometers wide. The area is very dark compared to the surrounding surface, with a reddish tint that strongly contrasts with the bright white ice of Sputnik Planitia. Scientists believe that this region of Pluto is much older, as it is covered with numerous craters. Suppose you wanted to take a walk across the rusty bumps of the Cthulhu region. Would it be worth undertaking this expedition? It's best not to. But if your thirst for adventure is irresistible, you should keep in mind that at any moment you could fall into one of the incredibly deep cracks, like scars crisscrossing this wild location. The ice on Pluto in the border areas is quite porous, so it's very easy to fall into the abyss, even when it seems like the astronaut has found solid ground. In general, Plutonian ice and its properties deserve a separate video, since it is radically different from Earth's ice. For example, many mountains here are made entirely of water ice, which, due to its high density, is able to form such massive structures, unlike on Earth. This isn't surprising since its melting point is 0 degrees Celsius, a temperature Pluto never reaches. In addition, Sputnik Planitia and the Cthulhu region contain methane, nitrogen, and carbon monoxide ices, which melt at minus 180 to 200 degrees Celsius and below. Also, while walking through the Cthulhu region, you could suddenly find yourself on the edge of a crater with a diameter of over 10 kilometers. It is here, if you ignore the frozen doom, that the surface of the panorama most closely resembles that of the moon. Would you like to take a look at Pluto's sky? An astronaut is bound to have such a thought when his eyes, even protected by special reflective lenses, become extremely tired from the monotonous landscape and the dazzling white color, occasionally broken up by patches of rust. But scientific facts are hardly romantic. Of course, the visitor won't see any serene blue sky. Above his head will hang a black, impenetrable dome, studded with myriads of golden dots that don't twinkle, but shine like the beams of a laser pointer. The crowning glory of this magnificence is the flowing disk of the Milky Way, eternity, like a river made up of billions of stars. Somewhere among them, our sun is lost, just one of many bright dots on the Neptunian horizon. However, there is a feature that distantly connects Pluto and Earth, a bluish haze that will still be visible on the horizon. According to data from New Horizons, confirmed by James Webb, Pluto's atmosphere is multi-layered, and this creates the effect of a slight bluish mist when looking into the distance. But is that really all an astronaut would see in Pluto's sky? Let's not forget about the moon corona, which looms over the planet's surface as a huge, dark, rocky mass. The fact is, Pluto's moon appears 14 times larger in the planet's sky than our moon does in ours. That's why, even from the surface, you can clearly see details of its landscape, such as craters and the terrifying Mordor region. Due to synchronous rotation, Charon never leaves Pluto's sky. But then comes a long night lasting 76 hours, or just over 3 Earth days. In total, a Plutonian day lasts 6 Earth days, or about 153 hours. The pale dot, our sun, disappears below the horizon at night, and the cold becomes unbearable. What should you do during this time? The astronaut will have to quickly hop to the module and hide inside it. Otherwise, the visitor faces a painful death. After all, the spacesuit is already working at its limit. Our virtual tour of the distant Pluto's surface has come to an end. The astronaut feels tired not only physically from the cold and prolonged activity, but also mentally from the absolute isolation in a hostile environment. What do you think? Will such a journey become possible soon, when we will see the icy world of Pluto, filled with ancient mysteries and dead silence, where it would take millions of years to notice the movement of the icy dunes? Share your impressions. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and pay attention to the date and time when you came across this video. This is very important and can serve as a symbol of future significant events. Be sure to record the date and time so you can later check what these numbers mean. There are predestined coincidences in life.